Hey, Garth.
Jason, my
How's it going?
friend, how are you?
Yep. I'm good, man. I'm good. This has been a great season so far. Getting better.
Yeah,
Today's episode's amazing.
it is amazing. Hey, listen, I've got a question for you that pertains to the episode.
Let's have it.
Jason, what's one of the most where were you? Where were you when you had one of the most powerful learning experiences of your life? Could be at any time. Where were you? Who were you with?
So I was in Portugal. I was sitting
Oh,
in a small town in Portugal eating a tuna sandwich. And I realized that the tuna sandwich had taken me an hour and a half to eat. And just at the point where I'd slowed down in my life enough to really, really sit and listen to stories, to take them in, to be contemplative, to think. I just remember sitting there kind of on a seawall and eating a sandwich. And I just remember thinking, oh, I'm kind of at that space where I can sit, listen, take it in, be reflective, and think about my purpose. And
yeah.
truly that was a moment. It was a very long lunch in Portugal. That's the moment I come to. What about you?
One of the ones that I keep going back to was I used to coach rowing in downtown Toronto,
Hmm.
serving sort of at-risk neighborhoods. And at one point in time, I was coaching a young woman who had cerebral palsy. And I remember I was young at the time, and I remember speaking with her and trying to explain, the rowing stroke and how she might go about doing it. And she looked up at me and she was like, just treat me normally.
Yeah.
Because I guess I was slowing down how I was speaking. I was overemphasizing my words. I was using different actions. And it was really powerful because I thought I was doing good, thought I was doing the right thing, and I
Yeah.
wasn't. And that just really shifted my perspective. And one of the reasons I'm an educator, you can
Yeah.
learn so much from a whole host of different people in your lives if you take the time to listen and actually like integrate it. And
Right. And I
Jason,
think, yeah, go for it.
that's what we're talking about
Oh
on
man.
today's podcast with the two authors of the book, How to Navigate Life, Belle Liang and Tim Klein. And it's
I
amazing.
really hope people slow down, just like that long tuna sandwich lunch, and listen to this podcast. I think it provides a lot of opportunity for reflection on our life and how we look at purpose in our lives. These two authors really teach us a lot in this 30-minute podcast.
Yeah. Enjoy, everybody.
With Garth and Jason, we dive right in, breaking down Ted's world. Let's begin from AFC, Richmond's field to your day to day. Lassoing leadership's here to stay. Keep leading the lasso away. Together we'll grow stronger every day. So plug in your headphones and let's start the show. With lessons from Ted, we'll learn and grow.
Hi, folks. Welcome to season 2 of Lassoing Leadership. I'm your host, Garth Nichols.
And I'm also your host, Jason Rogers. And this season of the podcast, we dive deep into 10 main themes that surfaced for us throughout season 1 and throughout the entire show, Ted Lasso. While you don't have to have been with us through season 1, although we highly recommend you go back to it, it was a goodie and really worth listening to.
Yeah, and we're calling our approach a leadership coach approach, where our game plan is laid out in a series of 3. This week, we're examining empowerment and trust in leadership. It's a big, weighty topic, to be sure, but luckily, we have 2 amazing guests to help us navigate, and I use that word intentionally, navigate this topic. See what I did there, Jason?
Yeah, you got it. Today, we are speaking with Belle Liang and Tim Klein, co-authors of an incredible book called How to Navigate Life. Their career and life stories are amazing, and I could say for myself, I'm so excited to have them on our podcast. Today's conversation isn't necessarily all about leadership, as we're discussing that and many other topics throughout. So it's about leadership of self. If you're a parent, it's about leadership as a parent. If you're a teacher, it's about being a great leader as a teacher and mentor for our youth as they go on to navigate life.
Yeah, and Jason, I don't know if you remember, but in season 1, when we were going through Ted Lasso, we were talking about how Ted, the character, was going through a lot with his own family. And I remember, being away, growing apart from his son, all that stuff. And do you remember you said, I wish we could get a parent counselor or something like that on the pod. And
Oh
here we
man.
are. We actually
Yeah.
have some experts who are authors in the field on this one. So this might feel a little bit different, but the lesson and certainly their research will hit the spot. I'm sure of it.
And trust is critical, and we're learning about it in so many different ways and practicing it in so many of our roles with members of our family and otherwise. But Garth, now let's get on to our guests. I know you've met Belle
Yeah.
and Tim before. Is that correct?
Yeah. We at Havergal College have the privilege of working with them for this 24-25 academic year. They're supporting our programmatic development and well-being for all of our employees and students at Havergal. So
That's
I've
so
heard them
cool.
speak on campus. I was very excited to meet them and talk to them and then invite them onto the podcast. So welcome, Belle. Welcome, Tim. Can you spend some time? How did you meet? Who are you? Introduce yourselves to our guests.
We're so excited to be here. Thanks for the invitation. So my name is Belle Liang, and I'm a professor at Boston College in the Counseling, Developmental, and Educational Psychology program in the Lynch School of Education and Human Development. And I have been a researcher for many years in the field of purpose and belonging. And after Tim introduces himself, I can share a little bit about how we met, because we are, very different people, and it's cool that
Yeah.
we are able to work together now.
Yeah, and I'm Tim. I'm a clinical social worker, former counselor at a school background, so very much a on-the-ground practitioner, teaching, working one-on-one with students. And so Belle and I have this unique combination of researcher, practitioner that kind of informs both what we do with students and how we think about the research and how we think about the work we do.
Yeah, and I'll just pop in there because your presentation when I first met you, it was like neuroscience and it's like practical in the classroom or in the hallways, Tim, right?
Mm-hmm.
I love the dynamic between you two. It's a fantastic partnership.
Well, what attracted me to Tim's work is that I happened to be doing a research study with a Harvard colleague of mine in the School of Ed there, and we were in Medford High School, and we were running focus groups with students. And one of our questions to the students right there in the library with all these students was to ask them, who's the most important adult in this school? And, all of them like popping up saying, Mr. Klein. Mr. Klein is the most important adult to me. And I was just like, well, okay, I need to meet Mr. Klein, because this was just like such a, ubiquitous kind of response from these students. And in walks Tim Klein after the focus groups. And so that's how our paths crossed. And, I came to learn about Tim's work there while he was an outreach coordinator and a guidance counselor at that school. The matriculation rates of students going to four-year colleges increased by 30%. So he's the real deal. He's somebody who is not just your average practitioner, but somebody who has made a tremendous difference in the lives and the purposes of many, many students. So it's been a privilege to get to work with him.
Hey, Belle, if we could just take a second and make Tim really uncomfortable,
He loves it when we do this.
What were the qualities that those students brought forward saying, this is why, he was the most important adult in the school? I think it's such an interesting thing for all of our listeners to hear.
Oh, absolutely. This is something really specific that Tim does with everybody. And he'll probably, if you give him a chance, he'll be doing it with you during this podcast, is that he likes to listen to people's stories. And, it could be, the kid who comes in and he's, because of a detention, and talking to Tim, and he's the kid who, everybody thinks is, doesn't have much promise. And Tim is fascinated with that young person's potential and where they came from and why they care about what they care about. And so I think it's, Tim's genuine curiosity and care around people's stories that, that make people feel like, that there's something to that, and that there's something of value in their lives that's worth listening to, that's worth telling the story about.
Well, I think, in our leadership exploration, that idea of deep listening, care, and trust continues to shine through in the Lasso way. Tim,
Yeah.
I think it would be unfair of me not to ask you, like, what are the best qualities of Belle? What makes her a great partner in this kind of partnership that you have?
Yeah. And everything Belle said about me, I feel the same way about her. And I think it was equally impactful on me because I was just, like Belle said, have always been really curious about people's stories, the stories they're telling themselves about who they are, what role school is playing. And so I would always just, from a clinical background, just like ask a million questions to students. And so when I met Belle, that was a light bulb moment for me because I was doing things that from intuition that just felt right to me in
Mm-hmm.
the moment. And then I
Mm-hmm.
learned about Belle and her work. And Belle is this global expert on the science of mentorship and the science of purpose. And I had never heard about the clinical definitions of those things before. But when I started learning from Belle about what mentorship and what purpose actually is, it was this clarifying moment for me. And it was like, oh, she is putting, with her research, putting words and frameworks to concepts that I had felt. And so what Belle did for me is like, Belle, yeah, is a researcher, but she's also an incredible mentor as well. And so just personally, what Belle did for me is one, she validated me in a way no one else had in the work that I was doing. And then, you know, from a mentorship, I think what mentors do, what leaders do, is that they see the best in people and then they empower the person to become that person, even if they don't see it themselves. So,
Wow.
like, I could see the way Belle was talking to me, the way Belle was talking about the work we were doing. She had this, she was seeing the best vision of me. And I've spent our whole partnership now being like, how, in a very motivating way, like, how can I continue to try to be that person that Belle knows I can be, So she's really brought out the best of me in that in a way that no one else has.
That's beautiful.
Far exceeded expectations.
That's great. Listen, I want to jump into the book. It's the content of the book itself, because when it comes to this podcast, what we're talking about, you've mentioned a couple of times here, the purpose mindset. It's such a
Yeah.
compelling way to think about life, relationships, and the way that you set it up against the two different types of mindsets you identify in your book. So I think it's an idea whose time has come,
Absolutely.
particularly in education and in the educational sort of context that Jason and I are in. So given all that's going on in the world, can you speak a little bit more to what a purpose mindset is and how it's different than the other two that you mentioned in your book?
Yeah, I mean, purpose, basically a purpose mindset. It's not what we do, but it's the reason and the story we tell ourselves in the world about why we're doing what we're doing. So if you have a student and you ask them, what are you doing after college or high school? Where are you going in the world? What type of career do you want? Purpose is not the title or the occupation that they give. A purpose mindset is the reason they are doing what they're doing. And so a purpose mindset is an intention or a drive to live a life that's personally meaningful, that also contributes to the world beyond the self. So when we are working with students and we ask them, why are you taking this dual enrollment class? Why are you taking AP? Why do you want to go to NYU? When you ask them about their own rationale, or people in general about what they're doing, people with a purpose mindset are telling stories about why this is personally meaningful to them. And they're talking about the contribution that they want to be making. So really, it's just the intention to live a life that's personally meaningful, and it's the intention to contribute in the world.
Amazing. And Tim or Belle, talk a little bit about how that differs from a performance mindset or a passion mindset, which I think will sound very familiar to our listeners.
So a performance mindset is that belief that the world is a zero-sum game, hyper competitive, and the goal of that game is to win it. And to win it, you have to beat out all the competition. So whether they are your rivals or your best friends, it's a very scarcity oriented mindset that has you scared, very fearful that if you aren't better than everyone else, you're not going to get what you want. So you have to get the top grades. You have to get all the leadership positions. You have to be associated with the right people in order to get into like the most highly rejective and selective universities, so that you can go on and continue that game and continue seeking to be the best. So it's a mindset that unfortunately doesn't lead to the intended success. And it's also a mindset that we're not saying like success is bad. It's that
Right.
singular pursuit of success that's associated with fear and anxiety and oftentimes underperforming as well. The passion mindset on the other end of the continuum is this belief that that life should be all about being happy. And in order to do that, you have to minimize anything that makes you uncomfortable. You have to minimize negative affect and maximize all the positive affect. And so you're making decisions then that oftentimes are about, what makes you comfortable, what makes you happy, even if you have to forego doing things that are very personally meaningful. As we know, like some of the most important, meaningful things in life will cause us discomfort and will be hard things to pursue.
Mm-hmm.
So they're both mindsets that unfortunately don't in the end lead to their intended outcomes of happiness and success.
So I know this because I've heard you two speak, but Tim, you had been living a sort of passion mindset, right? All throughout sort of high school. What does the journey, like now that, if someone reads this book and they say, yes, I'm going to seek my purpose mindset. What does that journey feel like to recognize I've been living with goals that are hollow or goals that aren't actually as fulfilling as I could be? Can you speak about your journey a little bit, Tim?
Yeah. Well, first, that journey, it's an internal one, not an external one. So like purpose is internal to each of us. It's not external. Like there's no purpose job, purpose career. Purpose is not something that you go and seek outside of you. It begins within you. And so for a very long time, I was just a class clown and I just was chasing the next high. Like I didn't take anything seriously. If it wasn't fun, I wasn't going to do it. And I just wanted to have fun all the time. I just wanted, to do what was easy. And that worked for a while, and you see people who avoid anything hard. But that for me personally, it's like the passion mindset, like being obsessed with our own happiness makes us only think about ourselves all the time. And as clinical therapist psychologists, this weird thing happens where the more you just think about yourself, the more unhappy you become. And so my journey shifted when, I started working at a low income public housing development in Chicago. I became aware of systemic inequities and privileges that I had that other people did not. And for me, it was realizing that there are inequities in needs in the world that I cared about, and I wanted to be of service, and as soon as I made this switch to making life not all about me, but how can I be contributing to others, that ironically made me more fulfilled. And it also made me more successful.
I think, we'd be remiss if we didn't bring up growth mindset, the WEC, and the idea of mindsets and that. And I think this question's rooted in the growth mindset. And just let me unfold it quickly. If you were sitting with a student and you could identify, pretty quickly that they're linked into a performance mindset, say, where would you start with them in helping them understand purpose mindset? Like, what are a couple of key questions you might encourage people to explore to better understand purpose mindset for themselves?
I mean, I can speak from the perspective of somebody who has struggled with having a performance mindset my whole life. And I think one of the key characteristics of a performance mindset is that it benefits a lot of other people, but it costs you a great deal. And that the emphasis oftentimes is like, what should I do rather than what do I want to do? And so a lot of times, when you're talking with a student and they have a performance mindset, it's, simply the question like, do you feel like you should be doing that? What you want to be doing? You need to be doing that. I mean, you can see a lot of times like that the pursuit is a stressful one. It's an anxiety ridden one. And when we are living in a much more purpose oriented mindset, there's a lot more ease. I mean, I just was telling a friend yesterday, I got home from work, I was like, I'm so exhausted. I've had the fullest day, but I feel energized. Like it was a great day. And, I know you all are nodding because what that feels like. You can be, going through, like doing really, really hard things, but it feels aligned with what your motivations are, what your gifting is, what you want to be doing. And so it feels great. Um, it doesn't mean that you're not tired, and it doesn't mean that you don't have to struggle in it, but it means something different than when we're doing something we should do, which can
Yeah.
feel oppressive.
And
So it's asking them to do a heart check on their motivations for what they're pursuing.
And just to get very tactical on that, where it's like if I'm working with a student who's about to graduate from high school in the US, college in Canada, it's like, what are you planning on doing? What are you thinking about doing after you graduate? What colleges are you applying to? And I'm really looking for what is the underlying motivation and reason that they are trying to apply to that school. So if someone says, I want to come to Boston College, I'm looking for why. And what I'm listening for is the performance mindset is driven by wealth, status, prestige, and power. So it's just like, do you want to go to Boston College just because it has a 12% acceptance rate and it's top 25 on the US News World Report rankings? Well, that motivation is prestige, right? And I'm not judging people for that, because we live in a society that says if you do not have wealth, status, prestige, and power, like you're going to feel broke on the street with debt that's going to make you never be able to live a meaningful life. And so when I hear that, when you ask them why are they doing what they're doing, like if I were to ask you too, why are you doing this podcast? Why are you educators? Why are you doing this? I don't think I'm going to hear wealth, status, prestige, or power. And so I don't judge people when they give those answers, but to me, it's a signal that they have never been given the space to explore, well, what is personally meaningful to you? What type of person do you want to be? What values do you want to stand for? What needs in the world do you care about? Because we live in an education system that doesn't provide people the space to do that. And we actually just push them to college prep around wealth, status, prestige, and power. So it's really listening for the underlying motivation. And then that's a signal to me they haven't had an opportunity to be reflective about what's really matters to them.
Yeah. I want to go a little bit deeper into what we've been talking about, because your book is incredible in the way that it combines storytelling with neuroscience. And you talk about post-traumatic growth as people who are finding their purpose. And many of our listeners work in independent schools or maybe in businesses. And so what really interests me from your book was this notion of privilege and purpose as well. So to promote a purpose mindset, you offer like some questions to examine one's life. I really like how you say that privilege isn't a reason for guilt. It's an opportunity for meeting needs with the advantages that we've been given. Can you talk a little bit about the connection between privilege and purpose? Because privilege can sometimes be in this cycle of performance. I don't want to lose my privilege. I don't want to take risks against my privilege. How do we align that performance mindset culture that some of us are living in our schools and our businesses, with a shift to a purpose mindset?
I think that oftentimes, people mistakenly think that purpose is associated with privilege. So, it's only privileged people who get to have purpose because of, more choices that you might have. And that, people who are underserved or, don't have as many privileges, they just need to like be practical and not purposeful, because, they don't have the privilege of purpose. And that just doesn't bear out in the research. The research shows that, purpose is, across demographics, and that oftentimes young people who are, come from very underserved, marginalized experiences, they tend to have some of the highest levels of purpose mindset, because especially if they've done the reflection around, the injustices, the systemic kinds of reasons for, what they've experienced, areas of adversity that have been, are things that they care about addressing. And so they can be some of the most purposeful young people. And that's not just our opinion, but that's what research shows. And so I think it's just important to recognize when we're looking, and working with all of our students, our colleagues, that purpose can can happen for everyone. As Tim says, it's something internal. It's not necessarily based on your external circumstances. It is, highly tied to an orientation that you have towards your life and to the world around you, that you want to be contributing to the world around you. And only people that contribute aren't the ones that have privileges. They are, everyone. Like when we've done research with highly impoverished communities, including those who live right around the Guatemala garbage dump, and their families have to work in the garbage dumps. And those young people are incredibly purposeful, many of them who have done the reflection. And they might say something like, I want to be able to contribute to my parents' lives. I want to contribute to my mom's life by getting, working hard so she can have a house, so she won't have to work so hard. So that's purpose. That's contribution. It might look different, for different, youth, depending on, what their backgrounds are and what their opportunities are, but they can equally have purpose. And so, it's not something that we should feel, guilty about, that if we do have privileges, and it's also not something that we should feel like that's not possible for us because we don't have privileges. And Tim, you can add to that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think it comes down to, well, one, I go as far as saying that privilege is a risk factor to purpose a lot of the time. And that's because the more we intentionally think about our lives, the more purposeful they become. And I know you two are very, very purposeful in what you do. A part of you starting this podcast is an act of being able to think meaningfully about what we do and why we do it. And what happens is that privilege, a lot of the time, doesn't give us the opportunity to be meaningfully thinking about our lives. So if you have a student who's been super successful in school with no bumps in the road, they haven't had to think about their lives at all. And we actually are seeing this a ton at BC, where you have these super successful students who've never had to meaningfully think about who they want to be and what they want to do. And then as they start to hit some adversity, some roadblocks, success becomes harder to come, they have this reckoning moment. And the interesting thing that happens is that oftentimes the thing that makes us to think intentionally about our lives is adversity. It's friction. When things don't go as planned, when we face a challenge, we start saying, why am I doing this? What is this all about? What's the meaning of this? And a lot of the time it's adversity that actually is the grist for the mill that gets us to be reflecting. And so if your audience is sitting here though, and they are like, well, I have a ton of privilege, right? And I don't have a lot of adversity. What can I do? The other side of that coin is gratitude and recognizing, if I have this privilege, how has it made my life better? And oftentimes privilege is so hard to think about because it's invisibly made our life better, And so when we can recognize the privileges that we have as a male, if socioeconomic status, whatever it is, that can get us to start reflecting on those things. And I know, I'll just say, Garth, you take students on experiential trips, right? And so a big part of what we'd say that's such a great thing is you're taking them outside their comfort zone. You are pushing them, you're having them experience adversity in a way that's very safe that they can. And these trips are getting them to change their perspective on who they are and what they're doing. And those types of experiences cause us to start thinking differently about our lives. And so that's where the practice of purpose comes in.
Yeah.
Now,
Beautiful.
Bill and Tim, I have a question in line with that, I think, actually. So at our school, we're a university prep school, have been for our whole history, frankly. And recently we've changed the way we speak about that. Say, we're preparatory school for life. And we're talking a lot more about purpose mindset, inspired by your book and by your research. So that's been exciting. But I think if I was play devil's advocate for a second, you have a parent or even a student come in and say, listen, purpose doesn't pay the bills. Riddle me that. Tell me how that plays out in our lives. So we're talking about privilege and, the opportunities that come with privilege. And I think sometimes you're right. It does drive the performance mindset, frankly. So how would you respond to somebody who is critical of purpose doesn't pay the bills?
We love that question because, we think that this is one of the most common misconceptions about purpose is that you have to either be purposeful or practical. Like there's just never the two shall meet. And so, but actually, again, that's not really, it doesn't bear out in the research, that it turns out that purposeful young people are some of the most successful people. They could be doing exactly the same things that the person who doesn't have a purpose mindset is, but they're doing it without the same levels of anxiety and trying to measure up and the constant, comparison and just that chasing after something unattainable. The purposeful person isn't trying to measure up, and they're successful, but not because out of a fear of failure.
Right.
They are, able to do the things that the performance mindset person is doing, but with a lot more joy and ease, like we were talking about before. So I think that, it's not that there's a either or situation. We're not trying to talk parents out of wanting their kids to be successful. In fact, we're saying that your young people, when they know who they are and what they want, and those things are lined up, they're going to soar. They are going to have a whole different experience in college and in the workplace than their peers.
And just to
Yeah.
add on that, just to make it, so it's not what we do, it's why we're doing it, which determines purpose. And so, if you look at Ivy League universities in the United States, a third of all students are going to be studying finance at those places. A majority of the students go in and study finance because they're like, I don't know what I want to do. They've never done the self-reflection. And finance is the practical thing to do. And you're like, even if I don't like it, or it feels like the most stable thing I can do is finance, right? And then let's say you become a mortgage broker. I was talking to you too. I'm in the middle of buying and selling a house right now. And so if you're a mortgage broker, why are you a mortgage broker? It's like, you know what? I just want to make as much money as I can. I just want to be super comfortable, wealth, status, prestige, and power. Or are you someone who wants to go into finance because, having the security of knowing how your money operates, like make the mortgage is one of the biggest financial decisions of your life. And you want to be someone who helps someone navigate through that, right? And so it's like, if helping people to have financial security is really meaningful to you, if you genuinely think that if my mortgage broker is helping me to reduce my stress level and my anxiety around this, if he thinks that's going to help them with it, that is purposeful. And so you can look at any single role, any single thing. And if you take an accountant who has a performance mindset versus an accountant with a purpose mindset, over the long term, that person with a purpose mindset is actually going to be more successful and more happy. So ironically, purpose is actually your biggest competitive advantage if you can understand what you're doing, all things considered here. So it's actually one of the most practical things we can be doing, but that's a very long-term view we have to be taking to understand that.
Yeah, and we started this, your definition of purpose is like, you have to have a strong reason why, and it's also the story that you're telling yourself, right? So that you are doing that self-examination. And in your book, I keep going back to your book because it's brilliant, but in your book, you do talk about the role that mentors place, and you have some personas in terms of mentors that you should have in your life. Can you talk a little bit more about the role that mentors can play in terms of supporting a purpose mindset?
Yeah, I think that, mentors really are a key lever for cultivating purpose. And, we have a broad definition of mentors because these are people who guide you in some area of your life. You might not necessarily call them a mentor, but they could be a parent, they could be a coach, they could be, like your youth group leader. It could be a experienced friend. So these are people that, maybe have walked a little bit ahead of you on the road and have some experiences, and they see you, and that relationship can really empower you to do things that you didn't believe that you could do.
Mm-hmm. Just to add on that too, so a lot of this, to find purpose, it's around self-reflection, right? Who do I want to stand for? Who do I want to be as a person? What impact do I want to make? And oftentimes the best way to craft our own stories is to look and find inspiring people out there. So it's like, if a mentor is someone who you are seeing the best in them, and that's telling you something about who do you want to be as a person. And so one, it's like, who is really inspiring or motivational to you? That's a mentor figure, because they're showing you a way that you can live your life in a meaningful way. And I'm guessing both of you, if we were to ask you, how did you get into education? I'm guessing there was someone who was like, you either had an educator who inspired you because you were like, look at the impact that they're making, look how personally meaningful they are. So you saw the best in them. Or on the other way, mentors are people who see the best in us, like Belle did to me, right? So do you have a mentor? Is someone who sees your potential even when you might not see it yourself. And so sometimes that mentor is like, hey, Jason and Garth, have you ever thought about being an educator? You're super creative, you're caring. I see these traits as being it. They ask that question of you that gets your wheels turning. And so it'd be great if we all had like a long-term mentor who you were checking in with quarterly for the rest of your life, but that's not usually it's like, that's a big ask, but it's usually like, who is someone who you trust and they actually trust you back? It can be a good thing. And that can be anyone. That can be a peer. That can be the secretary at the school. That could be a custodian. It doesn't have to be an official person.
Yeah,
that is an incredible. Oh, go ahead, Belle.
I was just going to add that I love the way that Tim put that it could be a lot of different people in your life, and people who you don't necessarily think of as mentors. Because I think mentors, like, people have a very specific idea in their mind, like somebody you do meet with quarterly or something, or somebody who you're in a formal relationship with. Like, not very many students say they have a mentor. And one of the things that I always tell, like, my friends who have kids who are going to college is to say, like, one of the best things your kid can do when they go to college is to go and meet with their professors and, just post up in their office, share with them about, what's going on in your life. You don't have to go into your professor's office when you have a question on the syllabus. And a lot of times students do feel like they need to do that. They come in with like the fake reason that they want to meet up with you, like they want to connect with you, but they have some question about the class. And, a faculty person, for the most part, for many people, at least at BC, they're, they are educators at heart and they're mentors at heart. They want to, listen to the lives of the young people who come to their office, and they want to be able to have a meaningful relationship with that person. They're not just there for like the transactions that happen in the classroom. They're there for, that more meaningful relationship. And so I always say, like, tell your kid not to be intimidated by that, or to worry about, like, crossing the boundaries of, being interested in, a mentoring relationship or friendship with your professor. They are, very accustomed to having, conversations that are, personable and personal in an appropriate way. And so I think that is something that is really, really important for young people to know, that that's the key thing that they can be getting out of college that will take them a long way.
Well, let me say this, Garth, you are my mentor. Okay, so there we go. And
Beat me
because
to
I
it.
feel like, out of obligation, I got to say Ted Lasso and Roy Kent. Come on, those are fictional mentors. But since I've met the two of you, Belle and Tim, through your book, I feel like I've known you much longer than I have. You're both mentors to us and to the wider community through your writing and through your research. And we really appreciate all that you've brought into this world with this incredible piece of work. So if other people are looking to find you, where would they look to find you both?
They can find us at our website, which is howtonavigate.com. And in the next few months, we should be looking we're going to have a new center, which will be represented online as well. It's going to be called the Center for Reflective Intelligence. So they should look for that in the spring. So we'll be excited to hear from folks.
Amazing. And before we go, we'd like to remind our listeners, we are taking questions for our next episodes. Ideas, insights, anything you want to offer, by all means, send them our way, and we're happy to take them on in our next podcast.
Yeah, that's a wrap. Thank you so much, Belle.
Yeah,
Thank you so much, Tim, for sharing. There's so many things we could continue on talking about. Hopefully we can have you back. We would love that, because there's so much in this book. Can you do us the honor of taking us home.
Yeah. Thanks for having us. And am I saying this right? Continue to lead the Lasso way?
Good enough for us.
Absolutely.
Thanks, everybody.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Step up to the mic. It's time to play. Lassoing leadership every day. From the pitch to the boardroom, lessons call to mind. Keep leading the Lasso way. You'll find we've got heart, we've got soul, and humor too. Exploring how Ted shows what leaders should do. With Garth and Jason, we dive right in, breaking down Ted's world. Let's begin from AFC, Richmond's Field to your day-to-day. Lassoing leadership's here to stay. Keep leading the Lasso way. Together we'll grow stronger every day. So plug in your headphones and let's start the show. With lessons from Ted, we'll learn.